Welcome to the Endpoints Podcast, presented by the ALS Therapy Development Institute. I'm Jonathan Gang. Scott and David Lloyd first joined us on Endpoints in 2020. The two brothers shared their story about how David's ALS diagnosis inspired them to pursue a lifelong dream, racing high-performance cars. This passion grew into Racing for ALS, an organization that has raised almost $1 million to date through high-performance driving events, all in support of ALS research, care, and services. Since that first conversation, much has changed for the Lloyd brothers in Racing for ALS. The organization has grown significantly, going from putting on one annual event, Dave's Race, to several across the country. However, their mission remains the same: to spread awareness, raise funds, and rally the performance driving community in support of ending ALS. Today, Scott returns to Endpoints to say more about what's changed over the past 3 years, what's stayed the same, and what's next for Racing for ALS.
Yeah, and maybe just like to start, I talked to you and your brother, this was before COVID, so probably like January or February 2020 or something like that. And we talked a lot about kind of your story and the origins of Racing for ALS and all that. So fill me in on how the organization has kind of grown and changed over the past 3 years, and what that's been like for you guys.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. And honestly, I guess one of the first things that I would probably bring up is the fact that my brother's not here. He's here on Earth. He's here with me, but the fact that he couldn't be here today because his voice has been impacted so much by ALS, and just continuing to watch this disease do what it's doing to him, but honestly, so many other people that we've been helping and working to with grants and things to watch them, honestly come and go. We've had a lot of people that sadly, we've lost over this last 3 years. It's been sobering, and for me, it just lights that much more of a fire under what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so that's really kind of been what the last 3 years have been about. Is we hadn't taken our foot off the gas at all at Racing for ALS. We continue to go forward as hard as we can, and have actually gone from, when we would have been talking to you in 2020, we would have had Dave's Race and that was it. Now, like this year, for example, we had Vince's race out in California. We've got Carolyn's race next week in Georgia. Dave's Race 5 is happening in Virginia at the end of June. And then we have Stewart's race happening down in Alabama at the end of September. And so, we continue to add more events and more opportunities for people to take part. And we are right now, I'm trying to think where we would have been when I talked to you in 2020. We were probably somewhere like $250,000 or something like that. We're closing in right at 900,000 raised, and really expect to be well over $1 million by the end of this year raised. And that's with 100% pass through to either ALS TDI. We also work with Duke Neurology and the Duke ALS Clinic, because that's where my brother receives care, and they've helped him with a lot of immediate needs and things like that. But also, since 2020, or at the end of 2020, we started our patient assistance and our patient grant funds. We've given out right at $127,000 worth of grants directly to ALS patients. And we run a van program that's been over about $100,000 worth of stuff there, where we have 3 handicapped accessible vans that we have out in the community, and we loan out to people for free for them to use as long as they need while they're battling ALS. So it's a big question you ask, because a lot has changed since we would have talked in February of 2020, but we're very grateful for what we've been able to do.
Yeah, awesome. And I think especially, to me, it seems like one of the biggest changes is now, instead of just supporting other ALS organizations, you kind of have your own services that you offer to people. So maybe can you talk a little bit about maybe a few more details about what you guys are doing on that end and why you decided to expand in that way?
Sure. No, I'd be happy to. And, a lot of it obviously tied to watching what's happening with my brother. And I would want to be very clear. My brother has never received a penny from our charity. And that's on purpose. We would never want anybody to ever have any questions about that. When you go back and look at us watching, what the wheelchair costs and what putting in the lift costs and what, changing his bathroom costs. And it was just like, wow, there's just a lot of financial drain. And we kept having folks that were coming to us and saying, hey, we need money for this or we need money for that. Do you know anybody who can help? And we finally just said, hey, we want to be that, we want to do that too. We want to try to help. And so we started at the end of 2020, we called it the Drive for 25. And that was to raise $25,000 to be able to give out 25 $1,000 grants. And ALS TDI helped us with that because you actually put us together with one of your partners up there in your area, to help us, look at some of the folks that they were working with. Duke helped us also. The Charlotte ALS Clinic helped us, and their folks helped us with people that were kind of deserving and needing of that help. And so once we did that, it just kind of started, and then more and more people kept applying, and so it's just been a really, really cool thing, to be able to go back and to give that tangible support. Obviously grants of $1,000, and now we're doing $2,000 grants. It still honestly doesn't even really scratch the surface, and that's maybe the frustrating part. I think the average expenditure a year is $60,000 a year per family dealing with ALS, but it's like, at least we can help with something. And it's seemingly that money has always come in at, the right time for families. And so that part's been really cool to be able to do, since I guess coming up on 3 years now.
Awesome. And obviously another way that you've grown that you've mentioned is adding all of, it's much more than just Dave's race now. So just talk a little bit about kind of what's gone into expanding those kind of offerings, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the events that you've been able to put on.
It's been really cool because we've got so many partners, first and foremost, some of like our board members and racers and friends, but then also now, a lot of the tracks, VIR in particular, we've worked with them now for 5 years, and Road Atlanta is our second year. We've done a lot with CMP. It's just, everybody in the racing community, they just want to help, you just kind of universally are just good people. And so expanding has been relatively easy, and we're grateful for that because we just have a lot of good people around us. But obviously, there's been some additional expense in things. And so, we brought in other partners, like, for example, Jay Zilla, they're working with us on races this year. They're a for-profit company that puts on high performance driving events like we do. But, they've on multiple occasions worked to help us fill our events and make sure that, we had our fundraising and stuff where it needed to be. The SCCA, you may recognize that. That's, the SCCA, Sports Car Club of America, have been around since I think the 60s. I hope I'm not, misstating that. A long time though. And, they've been doing a lot and fundraising for us at their events. Lucky Dog is another racing series. That's a national racing series. They fundraised for us last year during their national championship. So it's just kind of, and I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. And again, I apologize for anyone that I am, but those are just good examples to where other organizations and other, racers have really just kind of rallied around this cause and helped make it happen. And that's been really cool.
So, once again, one of the other things that has changed for you guys is you do have this new funding model of where the grants are going. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that works and how you picked the different places that that money's going to?
Sure. So, what's interesting is when we first started, as we were doing a little bit, with some of the ALS Association stuff in the very beginnings, and raised about $30,000 there. And, but then not long after that, that's when we kind of found out about ALS TDI and just really honestly fell in love with your mission and what you were doing. It was actually Corey Burrell, who called my brother up and said, "Hey, let me tell you about ALS TDI, and let me tell you why you need to support them." And it was, it was just kind of a cool thing to, to get to hear from somebody we knew and kind of what was going on there. And so, we had started that. And so for our first couple of years, when it was really just the Dave's Race events, everything was going to ALS TDI. But as again, we decided to start our own 501c3. It was actually right there in 2020, so we could do the grants and the other things. It started honestly becoming a little confusing because it was like, okay, Dave's race is for ALS TDI, but this other race might be for Duke or for patient assistance. And As we got into last year in particular, we had so many events, it was confusing everybody. And so we finally just came back and said, hey, let's do something to where everybody knows that every dollar coming in, this is exactly where it's going. And so we started the Triple Target Funding Program, and I want to give my brother full credit for that name. He's the one that thought of the name, and we had some logos made and got it all, made it all official. But basically, what it does is it means that 45% of every donation that comes in goes to ALS TDI. 30% goes to Duke Neurology and the Duke ALS Clinic, and then the last 25% goes against our patient grant and our patient van programs. And so it's allowed us to really kind of make it simpler for everyone, so that they don't have to worry about which event should I donate to based upon who it's going to or whatever. It all goes to the same place. And obviously ALS TDI is getting the lion's share there because as well, you all have continued to help us and support us as you have from the beginning and done just amazing things. You're going back all the way to, starting with Aaron and others, and now with what we're doing with Glynis. And, it's just very, very appreciated, what ALS TDI has done to be a race partner with us and for us, literally, since the start. So, still very, very grateful for that.
Awesome. And of course, we appreciate everything you guys do for us as well. So I think maybe just another way to kind of emphasize, how things have grown and changed is looking back on whatever it was, like Dave's Race 2 or Dave's Race 3, the first time we talked, like tell me a little bit about what Dave's Race 5 is going to be and how that's kind of grown from back when you first started doing this event.
It's a great question. The first race we did, which I think was 2019, we were given 6 weeks notice. We were given a date and we had 6 weeks to pull it off. And we ended up with, I think, like 45 drivers, 50 drivers, and we raised like 36,000, which was a success. But, we wanted to do more. And, you compare that to last year's race, Dave's Race 4, that was the first time to where we went to a 2-day format. And in that 2-day format, we now have a large barbecue that happens at the end of the first day that's put on by the SCCA. Again, they're awesome partners for us. Faster Skunk and Rob, he's helped a lot with that, bringing in the SCCA and doing that kind of stuff. But in that particular case, every year, it continued to grow. Last year, Dave's Race 4 brought in just over $220,000. So just to give you an idea of how much it had grown, and we actually, the race now, we actually drop it right there the day after Christmas, and the race sells out in a week. And so, like, for example, we have 115 drivers right now, including our wait list. We normally only let, 90 to 95 on track. So, going from trying to scratch and claw to get to 50 drivers to being sold out in a week, has been where we've been for the last 3. But it's because everybody's excited about it. And they understand how special of an event it is. And they understand that, it's really about helping other people. And it's, it's tied to my brother and kind of where he is. And so it's just been a really, really cool thing to watch everybody, go back and just do so many things to support us. And Dave's Race 5 should be a celebration. And we're really looking forward to it, there at the end of June. So it'll be June 30th and July 1st. So.
Awesome. And, talked a lot about kind of the past 3 years now. What do you see as sort of the future for racing for ALS?
That's a really good question. A lot of really good questions today. And, that right now is something we're making some decisions on, and kind of what it'll look like going forward. We started with a goal of 100,000, and then that went to 250, and then that went to 500. And, thank the Lord, we've continue to really pretty much knock those down almost, every year. And, then our goal and our big goal that honestly I never thought was possible was $1 million. And again, unless something happens we can't foresee, we should blow by that, by Dave's Race. We're at 884,000 raised right now. 522,000 of that actually will be, by the time it's all paid out, 540,000 of that to ALS TDI. And so when we get to $1 million, I don't know. That's definitely a big milestone for us, and we're gonna have to look at what comes next. I don't know. Right now, it's looking at either how we keep our momentum and maybe start to structure a little bit differently to bring in some additional people to help, or if we, scale back to maybe some of our larger events, like obviously Dave's race or things that, to be honest, yeah, that's something that we're really kind of looking at and honestly praying about right now in regards to what's going to be best, for the brand and keeping this moving in the best way. But we always want to be there to help any way we can. And we always want to be there to be a part of the community. So that's something that myself, my brother, and the board are going to be making some final decisions on. And we look forward to announcing that out in regards to what the next iteration will be into 2024.
Awesome. And kind of getting close to wrapping up here. Probably good to just include some stuff about, if people are listening and they haven't heard of you guys or it's interests them. Like, what are the best ways to get involved with Racing for ALS?
Well, I tell you what, go to racingforals.com, just racingforals.com. That's one of the first best, places to go. It's going to have information about our events, information about who we are, our merchandise, our people, all that kind of stuff. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. So, again, you can see what we're doing kind of on pretty much any one of the major platforms. And then that would, give you the opportunity to connect with us. And, for example, at Dave's race, we do have people that, come in and volunteer and take part. So, would love to have anybody who'd love to be part or come take part in one of the events. Because we call them races, but they're actually high performance driving events, which means it's a controlled environment. It's not an actual race. We're not beating and banging on people, like out there on track. It's a much more controlled and very, very safe environment. It's actually more of almost a place to learn. There's also parade laps. There's all kinds of stuff that we do. So just to be involved in the events, I think is crucial. Last thing I guess I'd throw out there, you can help us fundraise. On our website, again, and we actually work with a company called Mighty Cause, and we set that up this year to where all of our, events are there, and you can actually go in, even if you're not driving, and click on and create account and an account and fundraise. And so for us, that's, the biggest things, because the more you're doing that and putting that out on social media, again, it's not just raising money, it's raising awareness. And that's the biggest thing for us, is just continuing to get the name out there. Because when you look at everything that's been accomplished in the last 5 years, my brother, when he was diagnosed, was told it's either familial, which is 10%, or sporadic, and that's it. And we don't really know much more than that. And we don't, we know as much about ALS today as we know about cancer 100 years ago. You fast forward to today, there's now 46 different gene variants that have been determined. You look at the fact that when my brother was diagnosed, there was one medication. That's the only medication that had ever been approved. There's now 3 that have been approved, with another one coming. And so, those 3 of the 4 that have been approved ever for ALS have all come about in the last 5 years. And it's thanks to the work that, like ALS TDI and other partners, that we're working with, and all the money that's being raised, Ice Bucket Challenge, all that stuff. It's really pushing us in the right direction. And so that's why we're so excited about the future, what you all are doing with the ARC project. It's all of that ties together. So if you want to help, it's just continuing to get the word out, continue to help us raise funds, come to the events. Any of those things are always grateful and appreciated.
Awesome. Great. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of my questions. Is there anything else you want to add before we log off?
No, again, just want to thank you and thank the whole ALS TDI team for everything you're doing. A lot of people out there, that really need the help. And so, again, love working with y'all and getting to work in this environment to help as many people as we can. So thanks for everything you all are doing.
Yeah, well, obviously we couldn't do it without people who do what you guys do. So appreciate it as well, and appreciate your time today.
Hey, thank you, Jonathan. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
To learn more about Racing for ALS and how you can support their goals, visit racingforals.com. There are currently no treatments to stop or reverse ALS, but the ALS Therapy Development Institute is working to change that. To learn more about ALS TDI and our research to end ALS, visit als.net. Thanks for listening.